Consider the players in these few verses in Genesis. Abraham's unnamed servant, 10 camels, the well, Rebekah, and God. We're told in the verses prior to this section that the servant is Abraham's most senior and trusted servant, in charge of all that Abraham owns. And this man takes this vow very seriously. And this, then, is how God enters the scene. This servant of Abraham knows God, and that is significant. We don't know, we can assume, but we don't know who introduced the servant to God, but we know that the man does know. We know this primarily, of course, from his prayer, and the fact that this man knows God well enough to know that it's all right to ask for a sign, and that is just what he does. That is how badly this man does not want to risk messing up this task that he's been sent to carry out. And he's smart. He recognizes when he arrives in the town that this is just about the time that people should be appearing at this well. And so, as he prepares for the arrival of these women, likely unmarried women, he capitalizes on that timing. This man is also deserving of a name. Take note, as I think this may be the beginning of the church's complicity in treating others hierarchically as less than, even as unseen. The roots of the church's complicity in today's systemic racism. The well, while not a traditional character, is prominent in this scene. It's also prominent during this time, right? People in this time didn't just turn on the faucet or have pot fillers over their stove, and they certainly did not have underground sprinkling from which to water their fields or their animals. The well is also a source of relationship, where the women would have the opportunity to gather together, to catch up, to do all of these things without the presence of listening ears. And let's not forget those camels. So why are they important? Why do we factor them in? Well, Wilcox notes that one camel, can drink 20 to 30 gallons of water at a time. This man has brought 10 camels, and she offers to get their water. It's also, so we'll talk more about that in a second, but it's also just kind of funny to me to picture a well surrounded by 10 camels just laying down. I mean, a camel laying down is funny all on its own, right? So now we have Rebekah, a young virgin woman of marrying age, or so we can assume. And it is her connection to each of these players that from that we gain insight into her character. So first, Rebekah is not noted to hesitate at all at the sight of these 10 camels near the well. Personally, at minimum, they would cause me to hesitate. But when this is the source of water for the entire family, you push through. Regardless, I see it as Rebekah's courage and her determination. Second, Rebekah is reliable. Her commitment to completing the chore is all the evidence we need on that front. Third, Rebekah has the gift of hospitality. First, we see this in her giving water to the stranger and then taking that next step in offering it to the camels as well. Courageous, determined, reliable, and hospitable. Her connection to God, then, a little less obvious than the man's, right? But if you make the conjecture, if you read between the lines, And of course, remember, for those of us on this ride, we do so only with the verses that we have for today. We can guess at Rebecca's connection to God. And we do that by considering it through the lens of the request made by the man. Now, I don't know what you believe about signs and the Holy Spirit and autonomy. I'm guessing you know my perspectives on such things if this is not your first week on this ride with me. But at minimum, it seems plausible that if this man asks for a sign that depends upon a specific response, then the person, Rebecca, must also be open to the movement of the Spirit. Her responses give insight into her gift of hospitality and to her connection and openness to the Spirit. As with Esther, Rebecca's faith is not overtly discussed, but if you're open to it, the fingerprints of the Spirit are all over this story. So now fast forward with me several centuries. The text in Acts is, of course, not about Philip's daughters, and yet Luke tells us about them amidst this larger backdrop of a scene during Paul's travels. It could be argued that Luke only mentions them because everything taking place is in Philip's house and they are Philip's daughters. I think that Luke simply uses that truth as an excuse to mention them. For only a one-line mention, we learn a lot of significant detail about these 4 daughters. They are unnamed, and it's a little bit sad to me that in only week 12 of this ride, I am already used to that being true. That choice throughout the Bible, I think, is one of the foundations of yet another mess the church has created and continues to perpetuate today in all the harm and belittling and dismissing it does of women in general, let alone women in ministry. But again, I digress. So back to Philip's daughters. The NRSV states they are unmarried, though it is noted in my Bible that, and by Wilcox, that word can actually be translated virgins as well. It's an interesting connection, right? Is this the foundation of purity culture, or is purity culture a product of it? Lots to be distracted by today. Okay, Philip's daughters. Luke gives us only 3 details. They are the daughters of an evangelist, they are unmarried, and they each have the gift of prophecy. In other words, these are women of deep faith, connected to the Holy Spirit, and recognized in this circle as believers and prophetesses. They have their own ministry, not connected to any man, their own, each of them, independently. Luke was content to just kind of blow past that detail, but we do them, and quite frankly, those unseen today, a great disservice if we do the same. We obviously do not have the details of their ministry, what their prophecies included, that kind of thing, but these 4 women held sufficient significance and merit to be recognized as such by some of the earliest leaders of the Jesus movement. Rebecca is an unmarried daughter simply trying to complete her daily tasks when God speaks to her. She is hospitable and courageous and faithful, and she will need each of those qualities to sustain and grow her through what is about to happen in her life. Stay tuned in the coming weeks for more on that. She is far too much to be reduced to Isaac and Rebecca, or Isaac's wife, or Abraham's daughter-in-law. She is Rebecca. The 4 prophetesses were just that. They were not simply members of a household where a larger prophecy occurred. They were more than Philip's daughters and more than unmarried women. They were instruments of God because that is who God created them to be. They deserve to be named, and their role in the early church needs to be sat with, not rushed by. Rebecca, the unnamed servant, each of these 4 daughters. I started this ride for them. A woman who is shushed by her pastor, her husband, her father, or brother. We are on this ride for them. The women whose bodies people in this country want to control. The siblings in the rainbow community who are ousted or welcomed with caveats. We are on this ride for them. Our BIPOC siblings who the church publicly states are equal and then privately shuns, ignores, invalidates, or harms with a multitude of microaggressions. We are on this ride for them. She has always been called, and she will always be speaking. We are simply moving the background to the foreground and turning up the volume. Thanks for being on this ride. Do me a favor and share it so we can spread this word that she is called and she needs to be speaking.